So yeah, I'll just go right into it. It's a great honor and privilege to be speaking with you today. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time so that I can share a little bit of what I've learned in the years since I graduated. I hope you find at least some of it useful. The world you're graduating into is more exciting, hopeful, and full of promise than at any point in human history. I know it often doesn't feel like it, given the stream of bad news that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. But it is true, and I have come to believe that recognizing this truth is the first step to making the world an even better place. I say this while fully aware of the many terrible things that are happening across the world today. I am aware of the tens of thousands of lives lost in the ongoing wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in South Sudan. In my home country of Kenya, hundreds have been killed by flash floods over the past month. I have spent the past 6 years working on renewable energy in Africa, and I am intimately familiar with the challenge that climate change poses, especially for the world's poorest people. I know that it often feels like our society is more polarized by ideology and paralyzed by anxiety than ever before. And yet, I remain convinced of two important facts. One, more humans are living enriching, fulfilling lives today than at any point in human history. And two, we have the potential to be the first generation in human history to achieve true sustainability. I could spend the rest of this talk expounding on why I have a firm conviction on these 2 points, but I doubt any of you would still be awake by the time I was done. Since I spent some time listing the terrible things that are happening in the world though, I'll share a few of the beautiful things that are happening as well. For the first time in history, we have not one, but 2 malaria vaccines that are starting to roll out across Africa. Malaria kills more than 500,000 people every year, and 76% of them are children under the age of 5. With these vaccines, we have, for the first time in history, the opportunity to eradicate one of humanity's biggest killers. Carbon intensity per capita is down and continues to drop as renewables hit an inflection point across the globe. Global deforestation peaked in the 1980s. The air we breathe now is vastly improved compared to centuries ago. Cities like Houston and LA have seen dramatic improvements in air quality over the past few decades, improving health for millions in the process. Fewer people die today from natural disasters compared to 100 years ago, despite a vastly larger population and more severe weather events. And one of my favorites, honeybee populations in the US have rebounded massively, and the honeybees are now at an all-time high. This does not mean that everything is fine and we have nothing to do. No, not everything is fine. It wasn't fine in the past, and quite frankly, it will not be all fine in the future. It does mean, however, that we are progressing towards solving some of the biggest problems we have faced as a species. And the key thing to note is that the progress did not simply happen on its own. We made it happen. People just like you and me. People who sat in seats similar to those you're sitting in now, listening to some long-winded commencement speech, and then went out to the world, found a problem they cared about, learned as much as they could about that problem, and then set about finding ways to solve it. For each of these people, a key step in their journey involved believing that the biggest problems we have are solvable, and that the clearest evidence of this is all the hard problems we as a species have solved in the past with fewer resources, less knowledge, and fewer people. In other words, they needed to be proactive optimists. They needed to believe that the world could be made even better, and that they needed to play a part, however small, in making it so. This is in contrast to being a passive optimist who believes the world is on autopilot on its way to a better future, or a pessimist of any kind. Both passive optimists and pessimists are attitudes that are easier to adopt than ever before, but I urge you to avoid them. They are good ways to sound smart online. Unfortunately, they are also good ways to squander the hard work and effort you have put in to get to this moment, let alone all that has been invested in you by others who helped you along the way. Instead, seek to become a proactive optimist by assuming responsibility, not to make a bad world good, but to make a good world better. If you're wondering how to become a proactive optimist, or how to stay one in the face of a constant barrage of negative news and doomsaying, here are a few suggestions. 1. Pay less attention to the news. There is a difference between staying informed and doom scrolling on news sites or social media networks. If you must, read or watch the news for 30 minutes in the morning, then go about your day. If something major happens after that, let someone else tell you about it. 2. Recognize that the world has no solutions, only trade-offs, and that the world is a trade-off manifesting machine. This is why it's so important to move quickly from ideation to experimentation in pretty much any domain of life. It is impossible for you to fully anticipate how your favorite idea for making the world better will break when put into practice. When you like an idea, you tend to extol its virtues and downplay or even ignore its downfalls. The only way to cure this bias is to put your idea into practice on a small scale and work out the kinks as you go. One of my favorite explorations of this idea in the realm of values comes from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. It's called value pluralism. It posits that several values and principles may be equally valid, but can be fundamentally at odds with each other. This implies the existence of irreconcilable choices in which two equally good values cannot be had simultaneously. A choice must be made. one that necessarily trades off one value in favor of another. Put simply, it may be possible to have anything that you want, but it is not possible to have everything that you want. You must choose. This principle is important to understand because it leads to the realization that it is possible to disagree with someone, even at a values level, without demonizing them. And we could all do with a little less demonization these days. 3, don't wait for anybody to tell you what problem to solve. This is perhaps the biggest significant difference between being in school and going out in the world. Out there, defining the problem is the problem. 4, remember that you only need a few fellow travelers on your journey, and that though it may feel lonely sometimes, the best thing you can do to find your people is to start building your idea. As was mentioned in the introduction, I am on the board of a scholarship foundation called the African Leadership Bridge. What was not mentioned was that I was the first student recipient of the scholarship from this foundation. The foundation began, as was mentioned, as a casual conversation between me and my friend and mentor, Rick Reeder. Rick is in the audience, and so is then my mother-in-law, and Chelsea, my wife, and my daughter, Omi. They are all part of my small band of fellow travelers. That one conversation with Rick launched an organization that has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and put 7 students from Africa through college in the US and another 16 African students through college in Africa. And just last year, we partnered with the UT Global Office to launch an endowed scholarship, ensuring that our work will continue to benefit Africa long after we are gone. All this started with a simple conversation and a much smaller goal. I urge you to find your small mission and start building. Finally, remember that everyone is living this life for the first time, and therefore, they're all making it up as they go, no matter how elaborate their plans may seem. Don't take anything anyone tells you as an unquestioned truth, not even me. Feel free to disagree with anything, including everything I have told you today. But before you do so, I hope you take some time to give each argument a fair hearing. That is all I ask and all I have to share. Thank you and congratulations on making it to your graduations.